And in just under 2 hours, the historic meeting between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Joining us tonight to discuss this and its potential, presidential historian Doug Wead. Doug, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Lou.
This is a day that many wags on the left and in the national left-wing media, of course, and the great orthodoxy of foreign relations experts assumed would never happen and said precisely that month upon month in advance. Here we are. What are your expectations, Doug?
Yeah, and now they're saying it's a terrible idea.
Yes.
It couldn't have happened. I heard some on television today saying, well, Kim Jong-un only has 10 nuclear weapons. We have 7,200. Why are we sitting down with him and giving him? So which 10 American cities are they willing to stake the Koreans?
Yeah, we certainly don't want to press them for an answer because they probably have a list in their back pockets.
I'll tell you what's been unnerving to me is hearing some of the Obama foreign policy people trotted out. They're lecturing the president why he shouldn't be meeting alone. Every aspect, they're nitpicking every aspect of the Singapore summit. And the irony, the specter of Gaddafi hangs over Singapore.
Oh, yes.
That is perhaps the greatest foreign policy blunder in modern American history, when we've been saying to the Iranians, give up your nukes, and to the North Koreans, give up your nukes. Finally, somebody, Muammar Gaddafi, says, okay, I'll give up my nukes. He's going to trust the Americans, and he's brutally murdered and sodomized on television on the streets of his own country by his own people. That's the foreign policy of Obama, and it's haunted Kim Jong-un. Why should he trust America? So here are these people who've committed these foreign policy blunders lecturing us on whether Trump should try to seek peace.
I think that there would be a ready consensus available at any time that no part of the national security team of President Obama, nor the president himself or his Secretary of State, should ever have any comment on anything over those past 8 years other than perhaps a deep but only sincere apology whenever they are so moved. I would not expect it anytime soon, but perhaps that would be possible. As we look at what Kim Jong-un is doing here, in the room with these two leaders, but of course only in spirit, is President Xi Jinping. How big of an influence will he have? Has it been determined in your judgment that he will have over this conversation between two men who are sitting face to face trying to, in one instance, the part of the President of the United States, denuclearize a rogue nation, and on the part of Kim Jong-un, trying to find a way forward that does not lead him to utter oblivion and for himself and his people?
Yeah, quite a question. And you know, I love history. I'm a student of history, and I write history books. But I also served a president, and I remember being in the room with the President of the United States and 3 other heads of state, and there were only 3 of us who weren't presidents who were in that room. And I remember the calculation is so great leading up to that moment that they can relax, as Donald Trump said, and be themselves, and can be a little more extemporaneous than you might expect. But the answer to the question is great calculation. China has to be very nervous because they're absent at this meeting, and there's no question that what the White House has been doing has been calculated. People in the media have made a big deal about John Bolton's comment about the Libyan model, and the next day Trump said, no, we're not going to do the Libyan model, and they acted like this was a great mistake. From my White House experience, that was totally calculated and choreographed. A bad cop, good cop. They need Bolton in there and Pompeo in there so that Trump can say, look, I got one guy pushing me and one guy holding me back. You got to help me with this, Kim, and allow him to broker the deal and make the decision that works.
Doug, I've got, just based on my knowledge of the president and my study of this president in particular, I think the chances of him needing an excuse or something to lean on for an opinion, a perspective, a view, and an outcome is, let me put those odds at 0, if I can quibble with you on that. As we go forward into this evening and morning, 12 hours ahead of us, Singapore, of course, what do you think is the best outcome we can hope for from this initial meeting between two leaders and then a meeting with they and their advisors for as long as they want, expected to be about 2 hours?
Well, you know, I mentioned to you earlier that meeting I was in where these presidents were alone. And, you know,
the only thing I would say to you, Doug, is I don't think there's an analog with any president previous in this country's history.
I agree with you, but human nature, we all want the same thing, fame, money, safety, security, and foreign policies will wrap that in grandiose terms. My people need respect. My people need economic assistance. My people need security. But when Trump gets alone with Kim Jong-un, he has a lot to offer. He can talk turkey with him. And both men, in my opinion, contrary to what you've been hearing, I think both men succeed by having this event. Kim Jong-un gets fortune and glory. He's immortal for history. And Donald Trump now,
only if they do a deal.
Maybe he gets that just for the meeting, some are saying. But Donald Trump, what he accomplishes, in my opinion, is he's now free to take action if he needs to take action. He can say, I tried. We tried peace. I think he comes out of Singapore stronger, and that was part of his idea in going in.
I think that is a terrific insight and a very, very real outcome that Kim Jong-un should fear, along with President Xi Jinping, mightily. Doug Wead, as always, great to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Lou.